Hello, Bill Johnson here from Johnson Aviation with another maintenance moment. Well, today we're going to take a break on the Cessna 180 to play a little bit with another toy that I purchased. This 1995 Prevost Country Coach. Luckily, the hangar doors are 14 feet high and I'm able to pull it in here and keep it out of the weather. But it's a great coach. I recently purchased it from Olympia Coach in Nashville, Tennessee, and I think they gave me a very fair price on this. And we've enjoyed one trip, and I'm enjoying just the process of learning about the coach. But with anything that's 1995, there are issues, and luckily I have the ability to try to resolve most of these problems. And of course, Olympia is right up the road as well. One of the first things I noticed, though, was that when I first got home, and actually our most recent trip, the batteries, the house batteries, when I would plug them in, would really take a lot of charge, almost as if the batteries weren't charging going down the road. And it has quite a bank. There's 8 batteries in there, so it's a huge bank of batteries. Olympia had put in a couple of new inverters. Actually, those inverters were installed by the Inverter Service Center in White House, Tennessee. And again, they're in there, and they look great and they work great, and you have a huge bank of batteries. But you don't want to show up to wherever you're trying to get to in boondock and have your batteries already run down low from not charging as you were going over the road. Since the refrigerator does take AC power to run when you are disconnected, so it pulls the batteries down. So I started to investigate why the charging system wasn't charging the house batteries as I ventured down the road. The first place to start is back here in the engine compartment. You will notice that there's another set of batteries back here, and of course all the Prevost people out there know these are the chassis batteries, primarily for the engine. But there's 2 alternators. One alternator here for the house batteries, and there's another alternator down here that does the chassis batteries. So we started to trace everything back, and we found that the voltage regulator and contactor here in the firewall, I'm so used to aviation that I call it a firewall. Those are like master solenoids we have in airplanes. But in the engine compartment here, that solenoid connects the voltage regulator to the alternator. So if that solenoid is not connecting, the alternator will not be charging. So I started to trace the circuit back, and luckily Country Coach provided their owners with pretty good documentation. And I was able to use that as well as information that Gil had posted online, and thank you, Gil. He's a world of knowledge, along with Joe Camper. But I pulled out my books, and as an electrical engineer, I started to study the problem. And you will see that here's that solenoid I just showed you in the engine compartment. It comes back through the ECC, which is in the first bay here. I'll show you that. I think a lot of the Country Coach folks know what that is, but if you don't, Country Coach put a big computer basically in that box, and there's several circuit boards in there, all very simple, easy to repair, but that's where they all are. That was proprietary to Country Coach. So I traced it back through here, and then finally back to this solenoid here, which is powered off this wire. It's the ignition switch. So when you turn on the ignition switch, the circuit is made. It powers that solenoid, which closes, which powers this solenoid, which closes, which powers that solenoid. I guess these are relays more than solenoids, but powers that solenoid, which closes and connects your voltage regulator to your alternator. Okay, so I checked power. So I actually went to the steering compartment first to see if I had power coming from the ECC. So I walked over to that board happens to be located in the front steering compartment. And I started to study for a few minutes. You have the upper part of the steering compartment, which is mostly Prevost. And then the lower part of the steering compartment, there's this area here, which I figured out was was converter country coach specific. And then I noticed, uh-oh, there's no board. There's a connector, a couple hanging connectors. And I guess I probably thought that was some option when I was looking on the bus, didn't realize it was important, but nonetheless, that is where that relay is supposed to be. And you'll see in this group of wires, I found the white ignition wire. So I need to build a board and put a relay on it to at least get that problem fixed. What I also noticed when I was down here though is you have an air line here going through a solenoid. It wraps around and heads up. And I thought, I wonder if that's for the air horn. So I connected a battery to the two terminals, and wow, those air horns are loud. So I can also put a relay in to power that. It also turns out that the mirrors are powered off that ignition relay as well. So 3 critical components I want to have working, all very easy to manufacture a board for, no big deal. This bundle of white wires though came from all the bay doors, and it was used in conjunction with the voice commands to tell you a bay door is open. So of course, not having that's not the end of the world. I just don't have my voice command on that particular item. The biggest issue or biggest concern is really the HWH leveling system. It worked through this board to control the onboard air compressor. I have not figured out that logic, and that's something I'm going to have to try to find help for. But otherwise, I think I can make a board and mount it and make it work. So that's my first challenge. I started that process by finding a piece of phenolic. It's basically an insulated type of rigid board that doesn't connect electricity. You can see I cut out a smaller board from this piece of phenolic, and that smaller board is laying over here, and I'll put a grounding bus on it, and I'll begin to mount my relays on this board. The relay I purchased to put on the board was from a local electronics shop, and I don't know where it is here, but I'll show it to you as I mount it onto the board. So that's where I'm at with the project. I'm going to take a break and do some work, and then I will add to this video and let you know how it all turns out. Okay, we have made the board, mounted the first relay, which should control the battery, the house battery charging, and the mirrors. There's actually 2 outputs that relay when you turn on the ignition switch. So I powered it on and immediately blew a fuse in the ECC. So it looks like that this relay is now functioning. It's closing, but when I tried to power this relay, it blew that fuse. So now we're going to start to look in this area to see if there's another problem either with this relay or perhaps with the heated mirrors or the mirror controls. For those that have not seen inside of an older Country Coach ECC, here you go. Along the bottom you'll see all the fuses. Green is good, and that's where I had a blown fuse. I've replaced it. It was one of the ones further down towards the end. And then I disconnected these 2 relays. One of them's for the mirror, and the other one goes to the house charging circuit. So this is a mirror one. Somebody has replaced it in the past for some reason, and this is the house charging. So I've pulled the wires off, and when I did that, the fuse no longer blows. So we just need to track it back further and figure out what the problem is. Okay, a little more troubleshooting. I took the mirror out of that circuit, that 34, and left this hooked up. Turned on the key, and everything seems to be working now. This relay is the mirror heat. This relay is the one that closes, that allows your solenoid to close for your house charging. You can see all the lights remain green, and back here in the back, the solenoid that needs to close in order for the batteries to charge. This solenoid here, I verified we have power across the terminals. So it looks like the heated mirrors are causing the problem. I don't think it was ever that steering compartment board to begin with. Somebody probably thought it was and took it out and maybe sent it away, maybe didn't, lost it. But the work we've done over here seems to be working. And that's the alarm going off that you can see we're wired back up there. And now I'll try to figure out what's wrong with the mirrors. Okay, I've disconnected shore power. I started up the coach and we're showing 13.6 volts, which means the batteries are indeed charging off of the engine alternator. That's good news. If the voltage is good. So I feel good about that. We've got one problem solved. Very important problem. Go back and make sure everything looks good in the engine. Okay, I have the engine running. Shore power is disconnected. As you can see, we are disconnected from shore power. I turned on the refrigerator just to make sure that the voltage would stay good, and it's 13.7, 13.6. We're drawing a little bit of current. So the house batteries are charging off the engine, and it seems to carry a load just fine. So I'm pretty excited. We got the first problem solved, and now we'll move on to the mirrors, and I'll make a separate video on the mirrors. Thanks for watching and have a great day.